So you wrote this piece back around the time that you were going to show the film in Venice for the first time. And it was almost like a coming out of some kind. Could you just give me a little bit of background of what it was that you were trying to accomplish when you wrote that story?
Yeah, so I was in a very strange position where the film was about to be shown, and there was, as to be expected, an expectation that I would be doing interviews about the film as it, was first shown in the world, which is a reasonable expectation, I think, if you make a piece of work that you're going to talk about it. But I was in this very strange and unique situation where I had made the film specifically because I didn't want the story told any other way than with all of the voices of all the players involved, getting a chance to speak. And I spent 5 years kind of laboring and agonizing over how to tell this story that was very personal to me. So all of a sudden I realized now I'm going to do a bunch of interviews and speak about this film without rigor and without thoughtfulness, because you kind of are keeping a conversation going, and I find in interviews sometimes I'm so concerned about not making a situation awkward for the other person that I'll just answer anything, because even if I'm not comfortable with it, because I just hate the feeling of being evasive or being closed down. So I worried that I was basically going to sabotage 5 years of work. And so my feeling was it would be great if this film could play at a few festivals at least, where people could see the film anew and write about the film as it was without my interview voice muddying the process, and without it becoming all of a sudden this personal story about me that was incredibly self-indulgent. Because what I tried to do with the film was make it about everybody and make it about storytelling and about narrative, using my family as an example. And I felt once we started doing interviews about it, it would inevitably focus on the soap opera-ish nature of it, and that would become the story that was out there as opposed to the film I'd crafted. So I wrote this blog explaining why I wasn't doing interviews at first and telling what the main sort of secrets of the film were. Also because a lot of journalists in Canada had expressed interest in printing the story itself for many years, and had been really decent and had really respected my wishes to keep the story private. But I think all of those people sort of expected in return that I would do an interview with them first when the story came out. So all of a sudden I felt like I just want to tell the story myself in my own words directly. And this is the beautiful thing about the internet and Twitter, is you can actually speak for yourself if you need and want to. And also I felt I owed an explanation to those journalists who had been so decent to not print the story for so long. So that was the thinking behind that blog.
It was very well written.
Thank you.
And how long did it take? Was it difficult?
It didn't take long at all. It was actually, my baby was 4 or 5 months old at the time, and I remember nursing her to sleep and then sitting in the bed beside her and cranking that out before she woke up. So it took about an hour, but I think I'd been thinking about it for so long that it was an easy thing to write.
Because you're dealing with, this is a memoir, really, but what impressed me about it was the way that in a very organic kind of way you searched and discovered and chose the method by which you were going to tell this story, and that was very unique to you. It doesn't seem like another documentary that I've ever seen. So explain a little bit about that, because for example, not taking a first-person narrator, doing some recreations, archive footage with talking head interview. What were the rules you set up for yourself? The kind of you're an actress, you're in the movie, the transparency and the different media you were using, like your father's writing.
Yeah, that was a really interesting process, because I've always loved watching documentaries a lot more than fictional, narrative films. Like, documentaries for me are my passion in terms of what I am as an audience. I never thought I would make one. I just didn't think I think it's a totally different skill set. So I was really aware of my lack of knowledge when I began this process, and I actually went into this lab at the Canadian Film Centre that the National Film Board and the CFC did together, where for a year I took this film into development in the very early stages, and documentary filmmakers from all over the world came and talked to us and looked at our projects and helped us with them. And in the process I got recommended to me about 50 documentaries that would be useful for me to watch to think about this. So I had this fantastic opportunity of watching so many amazing films that people have made about themselves and about their families and about storytelling. And I think it was almost a process of looking at what wouldn't work for me. Like in these great films, there were certain things. Well, like I can't do that. That's not me, and this doesn't work. So in A Stranger, there's this terrible sinking moment where I realized I didn't have a model. That no matter how many films I watched, I was not going to have a model for how to make this film. But I think it was a great process to go through to realize that actually I had to find my own voice and way of constructing it. Which isn't to say it's a totally original film. There's lots of films that I owe like a huge debt to, like The Five Obstructions by Lars von Trier, or F is for Fake, or Rashomon. Like there are a lot of films that inform this film, but I think what I realized was really I had to find my own way of telling the story, and I think my dad's writing was a huge impetus to want to make the film in the first place. So his writing kind of became the spine of the film, and then, you know, playing around with Super 8 really during those initial interviews, Ira Singh, my cinematographer, just sort of had the idea of why don't we do some B-roll on Super 8 of the interviews, and I thought that's kind of interesting because it sort of shows how even this process of making the film is relegated to memory as soon as it's over and up for interpretation and clouded by nostalgia. So even this is up for grabs in terms of what is really the truth and what isn't. So she did that, and then we kind of looked at it and went, you know, maybe there's a way of playing with Super 8 even more in terms of letting it help us question what we're seeing all the time, because that's really the experience of going through something like this in your own life. At least my experience was you're constantly questioning what people are telling you and how much is real and how much is their memory and what they need to remember, and trying to sort and untangle through all of those details in your family history is such a long, strange experience, and one of constantly questioning. And so I wanted to give the audience that same feeling. So that's sort of where we came at from the Super 8 recreations. That's where that came from. And then, yeah, I mean, to be honest, like the film that I wrote, you know, 200-page single-space treatments for, was quite a lot more complicated than the film I made. I mean, I think the film itself is quite busy in terms of the number of mediums we're using, but there was even more. There was this whole framing device where we were going to be in a theater, and there was going to be a narrator on stage presenting the various players who were going to get up on stage and tell their story to all of the subjects in the documentary who were going to be in an audience, and they were going to argue over the various films. So basically we got 3/4 of the way and realized we didn't need that extra shoot and framing device because the recording studio sort of did that for us in a way. But it was going to be the most busy, noisy, complicated film of all time. I'm kind of glad we didn't go through with it.
Well, what you said in that piece originally was, I wanted to get lost, immerse myself in the work, and be a detective in my own life and family. Mm-hmm. That is an interesting idea, that you're the detective. Mm-hmm. You're the investigative reporter in your own life, mm-hmm. and your own family. And also that if you lost your mother at age 11, that's going to be something that hovers over your whole life. Mm-hmm. And she will always be a mysterious character. Mm-hmm. Even and that pain and loss, that void, is always going to be mm-hmm. something you're going to be searching to fill in some way. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great joys of making this film was in our, you know, in terms of all the new things I was learning about her and the stories people were telling me, she was growing and changing. So it kind of oddly, and it wasn't the intention in terms of making the film of what I wanted to experience, but it was an amazing thing that happened, was she really came alive. I mean, like, my perceptions of her were changing as I would learn more, and, you know, I would learn something about her and it would make me think she was this kind of person. Then I'd learn something totally contradictory and then she was this kind of person. And it was interesting. Like, there was almost a sensation of those absent years being compensated for. I mean, as you get older, your perception of your parents changes. But, you know, my experience of my mother ends at 11. So it was almost like I got to, like, in sort of the course of a couple of years of making this film, go through all those strange mutations of perception that happen, you know, with somebody, you know, who's your parent. So so that was amazing, and I learned a ton about her, and in the end, it's like, it's inconclusive. I mean, she was all of the things people say she was, which is, you know, dynamic and vibrant and lovely and warm and brilliant and insecure and a little bit crazy and incredibly responsible and irresponsible, and, you know, just a mass of contradictions. And I think in a strange way, that's what we're all like. We're just full of kind of contradictions, and it's really easy to want to categorize us as one thing or another, but that, I realized, becomes totally impossible.
So as far as the stories we tell, your siblings are contradicting each other, and there's all sorts of strains that you're following where it turns out to not be what you think at all as you're filming. And also talk about a little bit about what is real and what is recreated in the film.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we all learned a ton about our family history through listening to everybody's interviews. So I think even through the film, people were really astonished by the things other people said because it was so unlike their own memories. And I think what was such an interesting experience to go through from my point of view as the filmmaker, and that whole idea of being, a detective in your own life, was, I don't know how many opportunities we have in our life or how much we ever want to sit and talk to the people who are closest to us and ask them for their versions of things that we experienced, and just let them speak and just listen and not interrupt with what your version was and not correct them and not add anything, but to just listen and ask those questions. It's unbelievable what you learn. I mean, I thought I knew my siblings really well, but actually they're much more interesting people than I ever knew they were. I mean, I've always loved them, but you just realize we all have such a stake, a personal stake in what happened and it being remembered the way we want it to have been remembered, that we're constantly interrupting people and not hearing the full story from their point of view. And there's so much to be gleaned from that. And I loved being forced into this scenario where it was not my job to have a conversation with them about it or to impose what I thought or to try to get them, convince them of my version. It was my job to only listen for hours at a time and to let the details that I disagreed with go by and to not, just to refrain. And that was an amazing experience that I'd love to learn how to take with me into my real life, because we just don't actually listen to each other for very long, even if we're good listeners. We're interjecting far too much, I think, even.
Well, I think a lot of people are always trying to buttress and support their own point of view, basically. They're looking for the information that's going to support that. I think you're absolutely right about that.
And I think that was the hardest thing in a way about making this film is, at a certain point, I mean, in my first incarnation of the film, the idea was it would be my version, my father's version, Harry's version, and then all my siblings' version. And there was a moment in making the film where I realized my version doesn't have a place here. Like, my version, if I introduce some kind of voiceover, it all of a sudden becomes the voice of God, and all of these other people are just kind of being set up to be knocked down. So in fact, my job is actually to be the filmmaker and the detective in this story, and my version is omitted. And there's I think it was good for me, but it required a certain degree of surrender and humility to kind of go, okay, that's not actually, what is in the film is not actually how I remember that at all, but that is what's in the film because that is what this compilation of people is saying. And in a way, it doesn't actually matter what I remember or what my version is. That, as long as I know it, it's fine. But that was a strange thing to realize. I'm making a film about my own life that doesn't actually include my own perceptions of my own life.
You couldn't have someone else interview you.
I thought I would, but then again, it just felt like so unfair, like such unequal footing, that then I'm going to be in the editing room deciding what I get to say and what everybody else gets to say. So it felt not fair.
But there were some meetings that occur. We're going to have to play this game of what we reveal and what we don't reveal, because so I do think that the mystery, if you don't know it, and I saw it without having read anything, I didn't know. I really didn't. And it was so incredible.
That's great.
To discover and not know the answer. So I don't think there's too much publicity. There's too much stuff out now. But how do you handle that? Where do you draw the line?
I find it hard. I mean, I feel like at this point it's not fair to not talk about what people want to talk about, but I do my best to not volunteer or offer up some of the twists in the film in terms of what's revealed when. Because I do think when people are approaching the film without knowing anything, they have a much better experience of the film. So I don't really want to ruin it for people. And I think that's, in a way, the advantage of, not being a big celebrity making this film is, people don't necessarily know or care about what my life is. So they're just seeing it as, a person.
You are a big celebrity in Canada.
I don't know. I mean, I feel
Aren't
like...
you?
I'm known to a certain degree, but not a ton. I don't think it's like, I certainly have a very normal life, and I live very uninterrupted.
I think of you as this. Don't get mad at me. I think we talked once at Premiere Magazine about the whole idea of being a young actress who grows up in front of everyone, and I think Jodie Foster came up as a sort of comparable, and becoming a director as well. But in your case, they watched you grow up. They all know you. So the question of your actual identity, the question of who your father might be, that's the mystery that's being checked out, right? Yeah. That would be of interest, wouldn't it?
I think it is to certain people, but it's funny, like, I mean, I meet people all the time who have no idea, that I'm an actor. I mean, I feel like it's strange, I think, among certain people, like in film or in the arts, it's possible I'm quite known in Canada, but I think outside of that, I'm not sure that I'm that big a celebrity. So, I mean, I certainly live a very, very manageable life that doesn't involve any of the trappings of being a celebrity, which has been great.
That has always been your deal.
Yeah, and I can walk around and have no issues. So it's like kind of, I always feel like I'm like at the perfect level. Like I never want it to change. Like known enough that I can do the work that I really want to do and have this amazing life and working with amazing people, but not so known that my life is compromised in any way. It's kind of unbelievable. Like I just want to I hope I can just stay here.
So, I saw you in the Telluride airport with your husband and your child. It was just the three of you waiting at baggage claim. So you're not doing that number at all. So what is your goal in terms of balancing directing and acting?
It's funny, I've been so focused on writing and directing for the last 5 years, and writing for me is the part of the process I love the most. Like, I'd actually be happy to write, for other directors and not direct for long periods of time, but I do love making films myself. I love writing, and that's been my focus. So I've really neglected acting for 5 years, and I think just now I'm beginning to think about it again as something that I'd be really interested in trying, but I think I will wait until, like, I'm going to do one film this year with Wim Wenders, who's a director I've worked with before and who I love. But I think in terms of really kind of re-entering acting, I really need to shake things up for myself, and I really need to kind of mix my process up, because I just felt like I really hit a wall and was just kind of giving the same performance over and over and really getting safe and relying on a certain number of tricks that I knew I could be competent at. And so I really feel like if I'm going to act again, I need to know I can give performances I haven't given. And
how about writing them for yourself?
It's funny. I've always really resisted that, the idea of acting in something I directed, because I just feel like, how would I ever cope with that? But I think if it was on a small enough scale, that might be a really interesting
Ben
thing
Affleck
to try.
has never done better acting than he does when he directs himself.
That's true. Yeah.
Because part of it is writing it. Right?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah, I'm toying with a few things right now. I think it might be some time, and I want to be a stronger director before I do that. But I feel like I do feel like at some point I would love to re-enter acting and just kind of throughout the whole process. I'd also love to work with a really strong director who could really help push me, in a direction that I hadn't gone before. I'm not 100% sure if I was doing it on my own, if I would challenge myself enough. So
back to the recreations. When did you realize that you were going to have to do that, or why did you need to feel that you wanted to do that?
I think that sense of wanting to create those same questions in the audience's mind that I had when I was trying to discover this story, of wondering what's real, wondering what isn't, and being sort of moved into one direction of, believing there are a certain set of facts, and then realizing actually, no, that can't be true, that must be fabricated. And I just wanted the audience to have a kind of parallel experience while watching the film, of wondering what is real, what isn't, what's recreated, what's real archival footage, and to have those questions. And what's been a big surprise was this lovely discovery that some people are really surprised, and I've loved that, to realize that some people are really surprised at their recreations at all. Like, even the credits, they kind of don't know why their actors' names up. So I always don't want to destroy that twist as well for people, because I feel like it's not
sorry,
to
it's
talk
so
about,
hard.
but it's so hard to not talk about, and
So you took the film to Venice and unveiled it for the first time. What happened?
It was an amazing experience, because I did not know why I was making this film, to be honest. I had all kinds of theories, but it made me really miserable for 5 years making this film, and I kept wanting to quit, and I kept going forward and not having a good explanation of why. And in my mind, I thought at best it will be a film that people, people don't make fun of, but it will like have a short life and it'll just fade away. And at worst, it will be thought of as laughable, and I'll be thought of as like self-indulgent and a narcissist, and it would just be an epic embarrassment. So in Venice, I was completely shocked when people responded positively. Like, it was just not what I was expecting, and it was so exciting to realize this thing that you have no perspective on because you're so close to it and worked so hard on and made you so miserable, actually people were responding to at all. Like, it was just an amazing experience.
But did you realize then the family mysteries are something that's universal?
I think I didn't get that.
You thought you had the weird story that no one else had,
no,
didn't
exactly.
you?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what's been surprising and lovely, is that when people have come out of the film, they're talking about their own families, not mine.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was going to be like this big focus on like, my family and my personal history and how I explored it and why I would do that. And in fact, people come out just talking about their own families and talking to people about their own crazy, insane family histories, or talking to their kids or their parents, and that was thrilling. That the focus was kind of taken off me and the ridiculous thing I did, and kind of on that universal sense of trying to find our family histories and wondering about them and how they impact us and how they inform us, and that was really thrilling. So no, I didn't realize when I was making it that it would resonate with anybody. It was just amazing to see that there is a universal theme in the film, because I didn't really know that.
But I wasn't the only one crying. Did you
that's
realize how
great.
much it would move people?
I'm so glad. No, it's been honestly like the most thrilling experience I've ever had with this part of the process of a film. Is usually something I don't look forward to, but this for me has been so much more enjoyable than making the film. Has been getting to talk to people about the film afterwards. Like, I can't even tell you. It's like, if I knew this was coming, I would have been fine making film just to get to this part.
So you took the film to Canada. You opened it there early. It's coming to the U.S. later.
Yeah.
And there you were, of course, welcomed and awarded. So you got to win some prizes.
Yeah, no, it was really
It was Best Doc and Best Canadian
yeah,
film?
Yeah, for the Toronto Film Critics Awards. Yeah, it was really thrilling. It was really nice. And it was really nice to get an award from that community, because, it was so many Canadian entertainment writers and journalists and film writers that helped keep this secret for so long so I could make this film. So it was really lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.